Kafka Hibino is your average pathetic loser who simps over a girl who doesn't give a shit about him. Living in a world where monsters known as Kaiju roam round, Kafka wanted to join the defense force. However, after failing to join the defense force, he ends up becoming a member of Kaiju Disposal. But his fateful meeting with Ichikawa turns his life around completely. On a rainy day, a massive monster known as a kaiju makes its way to the surface and completely demolishes the entire area. Citizens are requested to seek refuge in a shelter while the kaiju proceed towards Yamashita. To neutralize this monster, attack helicopters have reached the spot and engaged in combat. With all of this going on, people are intrigued to see which division will come to save the day. Just then, a mysterious woman falls from the helicopter, alongside some other people in edgy outfits. These guys absolutely obliterate the monster and bathe in its bloody rain. After all this, a guy named Kafka Hibino comments on how they've made a mess of everything and they'll have to work their asses off to clean it up. Meanwhile, the members of the 3rd Division are being praised by the public for their heroics and taking down the kaiju without any casualties. Kafka also witnessed this, but avoids them, just like my crush avoids me. After the main battle is over, Kafka and the others have to clean up the mess created by the kaiju remains. They take samples for investigation and tear apart the kaiju's limb by limb. As Kafka is working somewhere, he is forced to clean up the intestines because he does a good job at it. At night, as he is trying to get over the nausea from intestine cleaning, Kafka comes across news regarding the heroic Captain Mina Ashiro, which makes him reminiscent about the time that they spent together. This makes him wonder how he ended up becoming a pathetic loser, as he decides to not think about it anymore. The following morning, he is informed about the joining of a new part-timer, Ichikawa, who aims to join the defense force. Kafka's comrade introduces him as a good-for-nothing old fart who gave up his dream of joining the defense force. This makes Ichikawa question the reason behind it, as Kafka asserts that he reached the limit of how far he can go. Hearing all this, Ichikawa also deems him a pathetic loser and scatters away. At work, Ichikawa and Kafka are forced to work together cleaning up the intestines, which makes both of them feel nauseated during lunch. Seeing that Ichikawa is hesitating to eat anything, Kafka hands over a multivitamin pouch to him. With this, both of them start getting along well and finish their work on time. Ichikawa expresses his gratitude for guiding him through his first day and informs him that the age limit for the Defense Force applications has been raised to 32. Even though he pretends to not care about him, Ichikawa wants Kafka to keep trying. Hearing this, Kafka comments on how Ichikawa is not as shit as he thought he was. Just then, an ugly kaiju appears out of nowhere and ruins their bromance and attempts to devour Ichikawa, but Kafka somehow saves his ass. He then instructs Ichikawa escape and leave him behind because he has no regard for his own life. Even though Ichikawa doesn't want to leave him behind and fights alongside him, Kafka asserts that both of them are useless and his presence won't make any difference. With no other options left, Ichikawa escapes and Kafka grabs a steel pipe, as if that would do any damage. He keeps running away from this ugly kaiju and eventually jumps from a building. During all this time, he's reminiscing about the time he spent with Mina. Back when they were kids, their home was destroyed by a kaiju, and both of them vowed to join the defense force. They even made a bet to see who will become a cooler defense force officer. Kafka is definitely going to be the cooler one inside the morgue. He eventually gets tired of running away and decides to face the kaiju with a steel pipe, only to get his ass whooped. Just as the kaiju is about to devour him, Ichikawa appears out of nowhere and saves him. Just then, a tiger also appears at the same spot and absolutely obliterates the kaiju. It was Mina Ashiro who had just saved their useless sorry ass. She doesn't give a shit about Kafka having been her childhood friend, so she disappears. Following this, Kafka and Ichikawa are transferred to the hospital where they get treated. Kafka realizes just how overpowered Ishiro actually is, and he is like an ant to her. Secondly, Ichikawa addresses him and expresses his gratitude for saving his life. He also asserts that he should try joining the defense force, which makes Kafka realize that he should stop being a and give it another shot. Just then, a weird creature appears in front of him and enters his mouth. This turns Kafka into a kaiju, and he panics after seeing his reflection in the mirror. Even Ichikawa is shocked by this, but Kafka reassures him that it's him. An old fart who was passing by even reported Kafka as a kaiju. Back when Kafka and Ashiro were still kids, Ashiro used to tease Kafka for what he said about protecting her and blames it on manga. Hearing all this, Kafka threatens her to not tell this to his mother, otherwise she will tell the entire neighborhood and all of them will realize that he is a simp. In the present, Division 3, under Captain Ashiro, is prepared to take down the kaiju, which was spotted in the hospital. The citizens living around Yokohama are directed to evacuate to shelters or lock their doors. Meanwhile, the old fart who had reported Kafka is still present there and is quite frightened by all of this. Kafka attempts to cheer him up as Ichikawa instructs Kafka to smile. But the situation gets even worse and the old fart collapses. The situation is getting way out of hand as Kafka realizes that even his physical abilities are similar to that of a kaiju, and with no other option left, he has to escape the hospital. With all of this going on, Ashiro and her squad have received intel that the kaiju is fleeing from the hospital and is heading towards the evacuated area. Even Ichikawa cannot comprehend what is happening and questions Kafka regarding it. However, as soon as he turns around, he notices that Kafka's body is acting weird, and he even devours a bird out of nowhere. Just then, Kafka realizes that he has to pee, but Ichikawa orders him to hold it in. Despite his warning, Kafka fails to control himself and pisses through his nipple, which shocks both of them. At this point, Kafka has lost all hope and doesn't even know what to do. Ichikawa, on the other hand, is maintaining his composure and instructs Kafka to hide before the defense force arrives. Hearing this, Kafka realizes that he'll never be able to join the defense force and fulfill his promise to Ashiro. As they are heading towards the abandoned building, Kafka senses another kaiju appearing in the city. Ashiro and the others had also received intel regarding this, and they decided to split their team into two. Kafka wants to take down the kaiju, but Ichikawa deems this an opportunity to escape. Meanwhile, the other kaiju is wreaking havoc inside the town and even manages to injure some citizens. A mother who is stuck beneath some rubble instructs her daughter to escape, but her useless daughter persists that she'll stay with her. Just then, the ugly-ass kaiju notices her and attempts to devour her. Just then, Kafka appears out of nowhere and punches the living shit out of the kaiju. He then attempts to cheer up the girl, but fails miserably and scares her even more. Luckily, Ichikawa appears at the spot and takes care of the situation. For some reason, the other kaiju is still alive and Kafka gives it a good beating, just like my abusive ex. His punch was so damn overpowered that it absolutely obliterated the kaiju, leaving behind nothing. Kafka instructs the little girl to take her mum to the hospital and takes his leave. As he is leaving, the girl expresses her gratitude for saving them, which reminds Kafka of his promise with Ashiro, and he decides to retake the Defense Force exam. At that moment, Kafka manages to transform back into his human form. After some time, Ashiro and the others appear at the spot and examine everything. Even they cannot comprehend what just happened here. Ashiro questions her regarding the kaiju that attacked her and vows to get rid of all the kaiju. In response to this, the girl asks her not to hurt the good kaiju, which shocks her. Some time has passed by after this incident, and the defense force has failed to locate kaiju number 8, aka Kafka Hibino. He had become the first ever kaiju to escape from the defense force and was titled Kaiju number 8. Just then, Ichikawa is informed that they have received some letters regarding their job application. This time around, both of them have managed to clear the preliminary test and have qualified for the main exam. Ichikawa takes the letter to Kafka and informs him that he has cleared the exam. Much to his surprise, Kafka is enjoying his time as a kaiju and is transformed as well. Seeing this, Ichikawa gives him an earful and even beats him for transforming in public. Back when Kafka had first transformed, they had managed to fool everyone by asserting that he had ran away when the kaiju had appeared. With all this, Ichikawa questions Kafka regarding his future plan, wondering if he'll take the exam with his current body. Kafka asserts that he has been working his arse off for it the last 3 months and he won't let it go to waste. And since he is already 32 years old, he won't get another shot at this. Despite all this, Ichikawa is still worried about Kafka suddenly transforming into a kaiju and getting his ass whooped by the officers. 10 days later, Kafka and Ichikawa reach the defense selection test venue. Ichikawa gets shocked by its sheer size, commenting that it's quite massive because that's what she said. Kafka informs him that this space is shared by the defense force and the self-defense force garrison, with Ichikawa commenting that he'll be dead meat if he transforms here. In the meantime, other applicants also appear at the spot, which makes Kafka feel overwhelmed. Despite all this, he is determined more than ever to clear this exam and join the defense force. As they are conversing, a bratty girl addresses him as an old man and orders him to move his garbage car because she wants to park there. Kafka, however, rejects her like a boss. Stating that there are plenty of parking spots left, the girl still insists as Kafka decides to teach her a lesson. With no other options left, the weird girl takes off her clothes and reveals a weird-ass suit. She then grabs their vehicle and hurls it away like a toy. She further introduces herself as Kikuro Shinomiya and comments that Kafka reeks of a kaiju. Hearing this, Ichikawa explains that they work in the kaiju disposal, which makes her question the reason behind their presence. Suddenly, they notice Kafka picking up the vehicle with his bare hands, which shocks Shinomiya. Seeing all this, Shinomiya vows to show Kafka who the boss really is. Meanwhile, Kafka gets scolded by Ichikawa for using his powers in public, just because he thought it would be cool to transform a part of his body. With this, the exams begin, and Kafka realizes that he really is a pathetic loser as he keeps on failing to keep up with the lot. Even though he has been training, his body is still lacking behind. It is further explained that this test boasts 2 parts, a fitness test and an aptitude test. Considering that it would be hard to clear the aptitude test, they have to make up for it in the fitness test. Despite his valiant efforts, Kafka ends up in 229th place, whilst Shinomiya is on 5th. Ichikawa, on the other hand, is glad that Kafka didn't use his powers, as Kafka comments that it would have been unfair. Despite this statement, he feels like he should have used them and cleared the test. With all of this going on, a guy reports to Captain Ashiro regarding this year's applicants, asserting that he is quite intrigued by them. According to him, Haruichi Izuma from Tokyo Neutralization University, Iharu Fururashi from Hachioji Neutralization College, Ao Kaguraki, and Kikuru Shinomiya are the top applicants this year. The most promising one is Shinomiya, who had graduated from California Neutralization at the age of 16 and is considered a prodigy. All the other applicants are determined to take her down. Hearing all this, Kafka approaches Shinomiya and apologizes for underestimating her and gets his ass whooped by her guards. This makes the other applicants believe that he is some sort of pedophile. At this point, Kafka has lost hope, but Ichikawa motivates him by stating that the aptitude test might be Kaiju disposal, considering the last 2 years' data. According to him, the Defense Force wants to check their knowledge regarding Kaiju and their ability to work in a group. Following this, the Vice Captain of 3rd Division introduces himself as Hoshino, and it turns out that the aptitude test is actually about finding and neutralizing Kaijus. Seeing this, Kafka literally pisses himself, as Hoshino further explains that the applicants will be provided with specialized suits and equipment to deal with the Kaiju. These suits are made from Kaiju muscle fibers and automatically adjust with the applicant's body, enhancing their physical capability. It is further explained that the suit's combat power depends on the individual's ability to draw it out from the suit. Ichikawa has managed to draw out 8% of the suit's power, while Shinomiya has drawn out 46%. This shocks everyone. And another thing that shocks them even more is the fact that Kafka's combat power suit is a big fat 0.
You tripping, bro. You tripping.
With this, the exam begins. Hoshino explains that 36 Yojus and a Honju are scattered throughout the battlefield, and their task is to take them down. Their activities will be monitored by drones, and if their life is in imminent danger, a shield will be activated and the applicant will be disqualified. Just as the exam begins, Shinomiya takes charge and takes down 3 Yoju in mere seconds, whilst Kafka is struggling to even carry his equipment. Just then, Hoshino announces that Captain Ashiro is also observing the exam, which motivates Kafka. He realizes that the reason these drones are following is because they want to monitor their abilities to adapt. Since he lacks the ability to take down Kaiju himself, he decides to assist other applicants using his knowledge. Just then, they come across a Kaiju, and Kafka immediately recognizes it and guides the applicants regarding its weak point. With his help, they manage to take down the Yoju rather easily. With this, Kafka realizes that he is slightly more useful than Sakura, and gains some confidence as well. As they are heading towards their next targets, Kafka's luck runs out, and an ugly-ass Kaiju ambushes him out of nowhere. With his combat ability at 0, the suit fails to protect him from the attack, and it is decided that Kafka can no longer fight. Despite all this, Kafka is determined to clear this exam and attempts to stand up, but fails. Just as the Kaiju is approaching to devour him, Hoshino and the others decide to activate the remote shield, but much to their surprise, the Kaiju gets obliterated, and Shinomiya appears at the spot. She reminds him about their bet and announces that no one gets to quit when she's on the battlefield. Kafka expresses his gratitude as Shinomiya leaves to take down the remaining Kaiju. She even mocks him for being a pathetic loser and laughs at him. The other applicants are also determined to take down the Honju, but Shinomiya is just way too overpowered and she leaves them behind in her dust. Meanwhile, Kafka attempts to stand up as Hoshino informs him about his injuries and wants him to quit, but Kafka is still determined. He realizes that he won't be able to stand beside Ashiro if he fails this time. He informs Hoshino that he won't give up and stands up despite his injuries. Even his combat power rises by 0.01%. But this shocks Hoshino and all the others. With his sheer determination, Kafka has managed to beat all odds and stand up. The four-eyed cannot comprehend that Kafka is standing despite his broken leg, and Hoshino grants him another opportunity. Hearing this, Kafka instructs Ichikawa to leave him behind, but being a goody two-shoes, Ichikawa doesn't leave and decides to carry him on his back. This makes Hoshino burst out with laughter as he wants to pass them solely on the fact that they are funny. Meanwhile, Ichikawa and Kafka are quite serious about this, as they follow Shinomiya towards the Honju. The other applicants are also determined to clear the exam, but Shinomiya keeps stealing their prey and makes her way to the Honju rather easily. She eventually takes down the last Yoju in that region and proceeds to engage the Honju, who is quite ugly, not gonna lie. Despite the enhanced difficulty, Shinomiya takes down the Honju as well and clears the exam by herself. The four-eyed woman cannot believe that the Honju was defeated that easily, and she instructs the drones to return back. Even Kafka cannot comprehend just how overwhelmingly fast Shinomiya actually is. Even Captain Ashiro praises Shinomiya's abilities, stating that she is even more powerful than the rumors. Hoshino then reports that they were expecting at least 30 people to drop out, but there were none. He further concludes that Shinomiya was the reason behind this, asserting that she is a ray of hope for this country. Meanwhile, Shinomiya is quite satisfied with her performance and decides to head back to mock Kafka even more. Just then, a mysterious creature appears out of nowhere and attacks Shinomiya, striking her heart. With all of this going on, Kafka is lying on the ground and comments that they managed to survive owing to Shinomiya's heroics. Suddenly, he notices that the kaiju they had slaughtered are coming back to life, and this shocks them. Shinomiya, on the other hand, has managed to survive by concentrating her entire shield to one point. The weird creature is also shocked to see her alive, as it allows the Honju to take care of Shinomiya. At this point, Shinomiya has also realized that this creature is actually an intelligent kaiju and attempts to take it down, only to get butchered by it. Hoshino and the others have also received intel regarding this incident, but they have no visuals because the drones were called back. The estimated fortitude for the revived kaiju is around 6.4, which makes it impossible for Shinomiya to take it down by herself. After activating the remote shield for all applicants, Ashiro and Hoshino decide to head out by themselves. Shinomiya, on the other hand, doesn't want to be evacuated despite her injuries and gets brutally violated by the Honju. Just as the Honju smashes her into a wall, she reminisces about the time she got first place. But her pathetic father didn't even praise her. For some reason, this motivates Shinomiya to keep on fighting as she stands up again. But she is no match for the kaiju. The four-eyed woman notices that the Honju has even regenerated its severed uni organ and is condensing energy for an attack. Hoshino realizes that they won't be able to make it in time, and even Shinomiya has lost hope. Suddenly, Kafka appears out of nowhere and saves Shinomiya from the energy blast. She gets shocked to see that Kafka is actually a kaiju and gets begged not to reveal this information. With this, Kafka instructs Shinomiya to rest up and he will take care of the kaiju. Meanwhile, the four-eyed woman senses another fortitude of 9.4 and gets shocked by this. Hoshino concludes that their system must be corrupted because this figure is not possible. With all of this going on, Kafka absolutely obliterates the Honju with a single blow, and even kills off another Yoju, attacking Shinomiya from behind. After all this, he scolds Shinomiya for putting herself in danger and gets scolded himself by Ichikawa, who appears out of nowhere. Just as they are conversing, Shinomiya collapses on the ground. After this, Hoshino and Hashira appear at the spot and examine everything. They cannot comprehend what just happened here, as Hoshino remembers something similar to this previously. Meanwhile, Shinomiya, Ichikawa, and Kafka have reached Shelter 6, and with this, all the applicants are safe. Seeing the mess, Hoshino admits that Kikoru Shinomiya is quite strong, but she is not strong enough to have defeated this Honju and caused such a mess. Ashira raises some further questions regarding this incident, including the revival of dead kaiju. Just then, Hoshino remembers that he witnessed something similar back when kaiju number 8 was first seen. After all this, Kafka is admitted to a hospital where he gets treatment for his injuries and is informed that Shinomiya is also doing good. Ichikawa informs him that they are utilizing the Defense Force's best tech to treat her because she's an important asset. This incident has made Kafka realize that there's always someone out there that is better than you at the things you love the most. He also expresses his gratitude towards Ichikawa for motivating him, as Captain Ashiro is also listening to their conversation. She also expresses her gratitude for rescuing Shinomiya and bringing her to the shelter. Even though Kafka wants to talk to her, he holds himself back, asserting that he'll talk to her after becoming an officer. Meanwhile, Shinomiya is getting treated at the Defense Force headquarters where Hoshino visits her. He informs her about the incident and questions her regarding the Honju. This makes Shinomiya remember that Kafka was the one who saved her. But she lies that she was the one that defeated the Kaiju. Later on, the mysterious Kaiju that had brought the other Kaiju back to life is listening to the news in a public toilet. It cannot believe that there was 0 casualty and is surprised to hear the Kaiju number 8 being mentioned here. Just then, some people call him outside as it transforms into a human. It turns out that the mysterious Kaiju is actually a human like Kafka who works at Kaiju Disposal.